Okay, we're here live with Mark Friesen.
Friesen, by the way.
Friesen?
Yeah.
Sorry. I always thought I was the one saying it right and everybody else had it wrong. It's like, it's Friesen, man. What's wrong with
Freezing cold.
It's freezing cold. All right.
It's cold out
Mark
there.
Friesen.
You got to move back to BC. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark, and then we'll get this show on the road.
I don't know how much of me you want to know, but I was a corrections officer for 25 years, provincial and fed combined. After I retired pretty early. I started when I was 19. I retired when I was 44. I had 25 years in, and that was more than enough. If I was going to retire traditionally, I would have been looking at probably another 12 years. And there's no way I was going to last that long without losing my mind. So I started developing my own business on the side with the hopes that it would be able to sustain my life. And as it turned out, it was able to. So I pulled the pin at 44 and had my own business since, which is tree service. And,
Nice.
I've always been a political, whatever you want to call it. I've been interested in politics. I fell out of politics quite a bit. Ever since the Reform Party merged with the PCs, I sort of got disenfranchised with the whole system. And I was just like everybody else and just bitched from the sidelines. And I really didn't have a lot of hope until, I guess the hope got even worse after 9/11. That sort of woke me up to find out what the hell is going on in the world. Because a lot of people after 9/11 went down the surface road and sort of basically, blaming Muslims for the terrorist attack. That's generally speaking, but that's generally how it went, including myself. And so, I thought, but that's really weird because I've never had a racist bone in my body. There's nothing racist about me. And of course it has nothing to do with race, as I found out. And as I researched and I understood the issue, obviously I understood that this is a lot to do with ideology and nothing to do with race. But in that, it set me down a road that through researching Islam and then of course Islamism and political Islam and extremism and all these things, it took me to the UN, which was a weird thing for me to go through. But as I'm researching all this, I always end up back at the UN. Why am I always ending up back at the UN? And I got really into researching the UN and Agenda 21 and the Sustainable Development Agenda. And so I've spent probably 18 years diving in and trying to understand what's really going on in the world. Why are our politicians making the decisions that they're making? Why do we have all of these resources in our country, yet we're all, barely scraping by or barely making it? And so as I learned and understood it, then I started to get just more vocal on a local level, just talking to people. And then the PPC was born, and to me I was going to take care of, be given a platform, and I used that platform through the party to sort of raise awareness as to what's happening. Then of course Yellow Vest came to be a few months later, and that was another platform that came to be and that I utilized to educate and inform. And then, of course, with that experience, I just decided, you know what, I'm going in as a candidate, and ended up being a candidate for the PPC in the last election. But for me, it's not about, I don't want to be a politician. The last thing I ever dreamt about was being a politician. I checked out of all that business a long time ago, and I just really didn't see it as something I wanted to do. But because of the PPC and the platform that they brought forward, it was a great way for me to use the platform to educate and inform people. And I've always said, and I'll say it right now, that if between my work and others, of course, there's lots of other people that are doing this, but this is my focus. If we can get it to the point where people understand what's happening around the world and what's happening and how that affects Canada and all of the issues in Canada that are related to that globalism, if we can get people to understand that that's the relation, and they can we can unite against that common enemy, then I get to get away out of politics again, and I can go build a cabin in the bush and actually retire.
Yeah.
That's my game isn't to get elected. I don't want to be a politician. If it takes me down the road and that's what I have to do, then I'll do it. But that's just sort of a byproduct of what I'm doing. And so that's sort of me in a nutshell where I am.
Sounds like basically it's exactly, the similar path that the three of us have taken. We pretty much have our principles, and that sound like they're in line with yours, and it sounds like that's what would make you the best politician, is because you don't want it, right?
It's interesting because those values that are driving you and are driving me and driving a lot of other folks are values that we all share from coast to coast, and it's those values that are under attack by globalists and by globalism and by the agenda. And that's why we all will share. I mean, if we all sat down, all the YouTubers and all the people who are active, and we all sat down and we wrote a list on one side of the board, your values, they would all be the same. There's probably 10. And on the other side, the differences, there would be some differences, of course, especially regionally, provincially, there's differences between Canadians.
Naturally.
But those core values, man, those are what we're trying to save and what we need to unite around, instead of focusing on all of the little issues that make us different. And we always talk about what are the issues. Well, the issues are different from one side of the country to the other. I mean, look at Alberta, it's energy industry, Saskatchewan's energy and farming, and they're both ranching. And then you get to Ontario and it's manufacturing. You get the East Coast, it's fishing. You go to BC, it's logging and it's fishing and it's whatever. And so they get motivated and they get frustrated and they get active because of those particular issues. But those issues can be a divisive thing if they're not attached to what's actually creating all of the issues in the first place. Because BC wants to look after their logging, and Alberta wants to look after their oil, and Saskatchewan wants to look after the farms, and so on. And if people don't understand that we can resolve all of these things and many others if we cut the head off the snake, that's unity. Then if we identify that enemy, we can unite. And so it's interesting when you talk about values. And I think obviously we do have values. We do have common values in this country. We do have an identity in this country. And of course, the globalists try to tell us that we don't. And our prime minister says we're a post-nation state and we don't have a culture. And unless it's useful for them to say that, then they'll say it. But generally speaking, they're trying to destroy our identity and destroy our culture because they're part of this globalist movement that everybody's a globalist citizen, right? We're all citizens of the world and we're all live in peace and harmony, and it's all ours, right?
Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly surrounded in a divide and conquer tactic because I've lived in multiple provinces, and everywhere I go, when I walk out into the street, into the real world, and I meet people, it's like you said, we all kind of share a common sense, a common value. But at the same time, when you go online, everybody's fighting and bickering about, these individual issues that, say concern only them in their region. And I just feel like that's a sort of a ploy on, I don't know, like the government or, the bigger structures part to kind of separate us and make us feel like, well, like, this is your concern and that's your concern and you guys need to fight over it because only one of you at the end of the day is going to win.
Absolutely.
But it's not true,
Yeah.
But I think too that in a way part of the struggle is, if you go back 100 years, conservatives and liberals might have had their differences, but they could always resort to the common core values that kind of brought them together. If the surface issues were dividing them so much to the point where they were fighting, they could always return to these core values that kind of unified everybody. Right. We might disagree on some basic things on the surface, but we always agree on the bottom line. Right. But I feel like, living in an international city like Vancouver, it's a lot of people don't share those core values.
Well,
you know what I mean?
So that's one of the things that the globalists use, of course, is immigration. And that's a huge way to throw a wedge into people. And instead of managing and taking our immigration at at a slower pace. It's just flood these places. When I was in Vancouver, I lived in Maple Ridge, just outside Vancouver. I came from the prairies, and I seen a lot of people that were very upset. And this was in the early 90s. This was like 91, 92. And people were getting pushed out of Vancouver into the, bedroom communities, into places like Maple Ridge and Mission, because they couldn't afford to live, because the culture that was being brought in, those cultures were used to and survive by living communally, living with 20 people in a monster house. So people ask, well, how can they afford a monster house? I said, because they got 20 people living in there. I said, the guy who used to own the mill down the road, he had to sell because he couldn't compete with other mills that have been taken over by immigrants. And immigrants then pay their people lower wages. And that guy who owns that mill also owns the monster house that 20 family members live in. They all contribute one way or the other to that communal living and communal life. They have some that are on ICBC claims, some that are on WCB claims, some that are on welfare claims, some that are on, whatever. And so they all, combine their resources and all of their funds, and of course they can live like that. And that's not how we were brought up or how our culture is. But so they pushed our culture and Canadian culture out to the bedroom, and now probably to the interior. And so that's part of their agenda and part of how this is going to work. So there's a route to it. So they send, under their population replacement, they send a bunch of people from the Middle East or North Africa to relieve pressure there, and think that the pressure isn't going to be then transferred over here. Of course it is, but in a different way. So, but ultimately all of it is social engineering. So again, go back to values. It's this social engineering of, forcing transgenderism, forcing LGBTQ, forcing all of these, abortion, and promoting the idea of, and celebrating the idea of abortion, all of these social engineering things that we're all wondering what the hell is going on here. That's not what I believe. And I talk to my neighbors, it's not what they believe, and it's not what anybody believes that I talk to. You can't understand it. I know. This is what they're trying to do, right? This is the game. This is their modus operandi.
But it feels like you're. Sorry, go ahead.
I first saw you when you were disillusioned with politics, and you started making videos on YouTube. And then I followed you through your journey, pretty much, through Yellow Vest and the convoy and all that stuff. And we wanted you on the show too, because I've been really noticing your work and your research in the UN agendas, the SDA, Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development, the Paris Accord, the Global Compact on migrants, business. Yeah, those are new things I just learned, actually, was the Global Compact on business and on media. I didn't even know those branches existed until very recently.
I definitely need to do a lot of brushing up. Like, there was a time, quite a few years back, where I felt like this absorbed me, that my everyday life was concerned with research, and it got to the point where it was so sickening for me that I almost just the word politics or agenda or any of it, I just couldn't even look at it anymore. And I just I spent the last few years just living life, and it was the way I looked at it. It was like, I know enough to know, and I just couldn't look at it anymore, right? And now, the way the world is going, you have to step up. Everybody has to do their part and step up. So I feel like for me, I'm kind of stepping back into the game, and this is a whole new learning process for me, right? And now we're voicing our opinion publicly, which I believe is extremely important, because the more people that do that, the less alone you feel. Especially here in Canada, because there's so much American culture or international culture, and that
But I think that's a lot to do with the internet too, though. Like, if you say the only people you really communicate with on the internet, you're watching YouTube videos, and that you kind of get trapped in this matrix where you think everybody feels, that is 100% believer in LGBTQ, and you think they believe in globalism. It's like you have to interact with real people, and when you you know, you get trapped in this internet world.
Even regular people like us to voice our opinions, because, you know, when others watch, those, you know, they'll see this.
Like, we feel like that too.
And they will do it too. And then the more of us that pile on this train,
absolutely,
you know, it may, perhaps one day we will actually be able to make a difference. And
well, and that's it.
For me, that would be a true victory.
You said a number of things there, and you're absolutely right on everything you've said. I mean, at the end of the day, it's extremely overwhelming, because and by design. It's by design, but it's also sort of natural. When you want to transform the world, which is the UN Sustainable Development Agenda that Harper signed in 2015, that's exactly the title, Transforming Our World. When you want to transform the world, and your target is Western civilization, because that's where all the money is, what do you have to do to transform our world? And second of all, when people find out, wait a minute, you actually meant transforming my world, and getting pissed off, they have to figure out how to manage that. But when you dive down into the rabbit holes that all of this is connected with, it's overwhelming. It really truly is. I mean, there's been days where I'm ready to light my house on fire and move out to the bush, because you know,
I know that feeling.
and then of course, you know, so with all the research, and just that alone being overwhelming, and trying to understand and wrap your head around how massive this thing is. And then you get the attacks from the globalists, from the media, from the politicians, you know, that you're a racist and you're a Nazi and you're an Islamophobe and you're a xenophobe and you're all these other things. And it affects your business, and it affects your family, and it affects everyone around you. I mean, I've met so many people online through what I've been doing. But most of my friends I don't see them anymore. I don't, because I'm too hot, right? Like they love that I'm doing what I'm doing, and they support what I'm doing. But it's like, at the same time, they're leery about getting too close because I'm so hot, right? And I know other people have found that as well. And so yes, but and the echo chamber is another issue. Is it's really frustrating from my perspective to, you know, keep doing my live feeds and keep posting on Facebook and Twitter and you know, you get all that support from the people in your echo chamber who get it, who understand it. People in the party, people in Yellow Vest, people in Plaid Army, people in, you know, all these different groups that get it and understand it. But, you know, I still have to keep reminding myself, okay, so this echo chamber sucks, because I don't want to just keep telling the same people over and over and just have them, you know, like seals, oh, very good, right on, good job again. You know, it's frustrating. But we are, which is important. And then, you know, your guys like yourselves who start a stream, and then you start expanding on your streams and the people that you're reaching, and others are doing the same thing. It's like, you know, you tell 2 people, they tell 2 people, and so on, right?
Yeah.
It is important to get outside the echo chamber nonetheless, and this is an extremely important platform for what we're doing. But, you know, I'm convinced, especially going through a campaign, and we have to hit the streets. We have to hit, you know, town halls and forums and communities. And if we can do that, even, you know, like I showed that new release called Unsustainable. It's the best documentary I've seen on the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. So even when I was showing that documentary, I was encouraging people, so take this documentary and, you know, get a few folks, rent a cheap town hall or a school gym or whatever, and advertise, promote it any way you can, and show that film. And then have an open mic after for people to talk, right?
That's a good idea, yeah.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, I like that.
People can do that is really inexpensive. I mean, you got to be able to promote it somehow and find a way to promote it. But it's something that anybody can do in any community. And if they do it, then it starts the ball rolling. And then, so
I agree.
So then on top of what, you know, getting grassroots and the folks to actually start taking responsibility for their own communities by doing this. So we want to start the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty. Well, we have started it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Omar Khadr's going around doing his speeches, spreading his word, right? So we got to combat that and do the exact same.
Listen, you know.
And, you know, the people in their hearts, they know the truth when they hear it. Whether they like it or not, they know the truth when they hear it.
He went there on his own, you know, because he was moved to do so. And he's got He's got a great background. He's the perfect individual to handle that situation. And what did he do? He made a quick little video. I shared it on my platform on 3 different pages on Facebook, and it's over 140,000 views, and that's in less than 24 hours.
It's really gaining traction, that video.
But that's because people, it resonates with people because the truth resonates, and if you can get out the truth in a way that's receivable, they'll grab it and they'll run with it because. Again, we go to values. There is a core values that we do share and we cherish, and we gotta protect. If we don't protect it, we're gonna lose it all.
Sometimes I feel like that's the difficult part.
Even the people that were attending that venue, even though a lot of them are mind-numbingly ignorant, as Rage would put it, somewhere along that line, none of them would look at him. It's like deep down inside, they know that
what they felt the shame or something.
That they felt the shame and they couldn't look at him in the eye.
They're sheep.
And they felt it anyways. I couldn't help but think if that was me, I'd be like, wow, what am I doing? Like, I'd smack myself and turn around and walk out, right?
Yep.
Well, sometimes I feel like the difficult part is presenting, like you said, Mark, is presenting the truth in a way that's receivable, right? And for me, I question myself all the time. It's like, would I be able to do that? And I don't know, but I'm going to give it my best shot anyway. I know I can come off as really abrasive sometimes, and I'll tell you that, that's just the way it is. But I mean, everybody's got to do their part, and if we're all voicing our opinion.
You know what? At the end of the day, I can be abrasive. I can be a complete asshole. I try not to do it when I'm, speaking to whoever's watching my streams. But it's there. But you know what? I'm just me. Here I am. That's
what you got to do, right? Just be you.
And but I'm also conscious, right? Like I pick and choose how I'm going to present something because again, there was somebody used an example the other day. They went to the protest in Carsland, and somebody had grabbed the mic or stood up on the whatever stage they had set up or whatever podium, and they said they started talking about the UN, and the response from what I understand wasn't like wow, it was like silence because nobody understood what the hell the guy was talking about.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you got to know your audience, you got to know who's listening, and you got to know their level of information is very, very low. So you can't come in loaded for bear shooting squirrels. It's ridiculous, right? So you have to start at their level. And if you start at their level, then you can bring them in. And I always tie it to, an issue that they can relate to, right? Like, so you've lost your job in the pipeline because there's no pipes being built. Well, here's why that's happening. So we get the what, you've lost your job because the energy industry is under attack and the pipelines are under attack. They get that. They understand that. That's visceral and it's affecting them personally. But here's why that's happening, right? So everybody seems to understand the what's. Doesn't matter what region of Canada they're in, whatever they're being affected. They understand the what. The important part is the why. And you have to bring them to that understanding and to that knowledge. You can't just bring a sledgehammer, hit them over the head and say, that's why. You have to massage them, right? Like you have to really bring it in a way that's so I'm pretty picky about how I present things, and it depends who the audience is. It's and that's the challenge because as much time as I've spent researching and the knowledge that I've gained through all that, I have to continually remind myself that the folks I'm talking, especially out in the in a live thing somewhere, in a town hall or some sort of presentation, I have to remind myself, like, okay, people don't understand what a compact is. People don't even know what the UN is, and so you really have to be at this basic sort of point, which makes it hard to get through a presentation. But at least, at the very least, all I want to be able to do is plant some seeds. So when they hear something down the road, or they come across an experience or some sort of shit that they're going through, they can, oh, hey, wait a minute, that guy mentioned something about that. I'm going to go to my computer and I'm going to look up what he had mentioned. Oh, there it is. And then they actually come up with, their realization on their own. And then sort of empower themselves through their own research and say, holy shit, this is a mess, right?
Yeah.
And right.
It's a very organic process.
It is.
It's true, but that's the best, because you kind of come to your own conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like growing up as a child. I think part of the reason why I think the way that I do is because I was always taught stories about aliens, and through that I never had this trust in government, because government denies aliens, but I believed aliens were real. And then as I became an adult, it caused me to do research into that, and one thing led to another, and and eventually you kind of come to the conclusion you are now. It's like you go from a little seed that isn't even related to, say, politics, but at the same time it builds that mistrust. Like, do I believe everything that I'm being fed? Well, let's look into that. And then it just gets the whole thing rolling, and people start thinking, and now we are at the point where people are talking, and hopefully shit will start getting done.
I'll give you an example of how I look at it, because being in the PPC, again, the only reason I'm in the PPC, the only reason I support the PPC is because it's the only party that's actually talking against globalism and the UN, blah, blah, blah. But so even now, after I've gone through the campaign, my focus isn't the PPC. Like, it's not, I could, at this point right now, I could care less who you support politically, because ultimately, if you learn the information and understand everything that's happening and understand how your issues that you take to heart are directly related to the UN and sustainable development, if you get that, when you come to that point, there will be no choice but for you to vote for the People's Party. Because you can't justify voting for the establishment if you understand globalism at the level that you need to understand it and understand its consequences and impact. There won't be, unless you're, of course, a separatist, then you can build the argument that you think Alberta should separate or the West should separate based on those and that information. That, for me, that's okay. I don't care, as long as you got the information, as long as you're spreading the information so everyone else understands, then we can decide how to fix it. But until people get it.
You're right. Knowledge is power. Once you understand what's going on and you understand the policies behind it, and that doesn't matter if you're a Wexiteer or if you support the PPC or even the CPC or Liberals, you understand the policies and how they're being implemented in that. And that can help you to make a better, more informed decision about the direction you want the country to go in.
And then you can actually drive your representatives and force them to lead from the front instead of leading from the rear. I mean, right now, every single parliamentarian MP sitting in the seat or their seat in Ottawa are all just sheep themselves. They're told by the party what to do, what to vote for, how to talk, what to say, what not to say. Don't talk. That they're robots, so they don't represent the people. They represent their party. But if people become informed and they understand, they can hold account these people and say, "Listen, what are you actually doing to represent the issues here in my community that are relative to and in consequence now to the UN Sustainable Development Agenda?" Then people can start holding their politicians to account. Right now, the politicians got everyone by the balls because nobody knows what's happening, nobody knows what's going on, and the politicians just talk their talking points, and it's either I'm red or I'm blue, and that's my camp, that's my team, that's who I'm supporting. And they laugh all the way to the bank because they're all getting paid, they're all getting their pensions, they don't give a hoot about anything outside. Most of them don't even understand Sustainable Development Agenda. They have no idea what we're talking about.
And you're right. It's like a couple of hockey teams or something. There's infighting, and you're fighting over nonsense, like say Max didn't gain any seats and people are laughing at you now, but they don't understand the reason why people supported the PPC in the first place and the policies. And, it's just my team versus your team. And that's not how we change things.
For me, for example, I mean, I never voted ever. I absolutely abhorred politics. I couldn't stand to even look at any of the parties at all. But I voted for the PPC because they were the only party that actually resonated with me, you know what I mean, as a Canadian and as a person. I didn't feel so alienated, and so at least it didn't feel like they were just there to overlord, you know, and control everything that I do and that I see and that I hear. It felt like something that it truly was a grassroots movement, you know, and it kind of got me out of my seat. And, you know, I keep seeing a lot how people are like, oh, you voted for the PPC instead of the CPC. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? I never would have voted anyway. So it's not like you lost a vote. You know, don't get mad at me and say it's my fault that the Liberals won, because I tell you this right now, if the PPC didn't exist, then I just would have been yet again another non-voter, just a bystander. Like you said, off in the woods building my cabin, because that's what me and John do. You know, we go off in the woods, we build our cabin, we live life, and you know, there was no point in even concerning ourselves with any of that because it was hopeless for people.
It was hopeless because there was nobody there representing the things that.
No, it was just, they were just there to tell me what they wanted from me. You know, I wasn't getting anything out of the situation. I was only losing on every front.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I think your work is so important, Mark, because you're raising awareness about these treaties, you know, these agreements and their impact on Canada and the globe. And it's very important.
Well, yeah, we definitely appreciate people like you.
I've had a lot of people, you know, in the time that I've been doing this, try to drag me in certain directions, drag me here, drag me there, drag me here. This is what it is. This is what it is. And I tell them all to fuck off. You know, like I get it. I know what you're doing. I know what your concerns are. I know exactly it. But I have a mission. And my mission is to educate, inform Canadians about the UN. That's it. That's it. And if I can do that, then, hey, it's all good. Then, you know, like I said, once everybody understands, then I'm going to my cabin and I'm going to fuck off. Right.
You know, and I completely understand that too, because people get this preconceived idea in their mind and say like, well, what do you think about this issue? Why aren't you focusing on this issue? And it's like, listen, honestly, the world's too big. There's too much information. We need specialists. You know what I mean? We need people who can focus all their energy on one given task, not like be jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I completely understand that. And you just can't. It's too much, you know. So
and the other thing is like I saw it, you know, not so much in the PPC. It was actually kind of nice going back to the, you know, I visualized myself being dragged through Yellow Vest and PPC, and it was always nice going back to the PPC because we had a platform and we had core values that the party represented, so nobody could stray too far from that. But within the Yellow Vest, there was no structure, there was no direction. There is no, you know, guiding principles for the movement, and of course there was no leader, which is in that sort of thing I think is a good thing. But at the same time, you had all of these different groups forming that had all of these solutions. And I said from the minute I got into the movement to the minute I left that you can't focus on the solutions right now. You simply can't, because too many people have their own idea of what the solution is, myself included. So I'm not going to promote my solutions, but I sure as hell am going to promote the issues and why they exist. Because if everybody understood why, and we had a great opportunity, and I think it did help, and I think the Yellow Vest did help move the barometer of information because it was a platform. But it was so fractured by solution instead of uniting by the issues. And I still say to this day, that's why the movement has died, because it's too fractured. There's too many egos. There's too many agendas. Instead of talking about the issues and why they exist, if we would have done that on a mass scale, we would have attracted a lot more than 100,000 people. It would have been, you know, a nation. But again, it's also human nature, right? So when you're working, those things are going to happen. So I learned very early on through that process that I have to just, you know, accept that there's other groups. And I even now, as you know, as an independent, I'm just moving forward. I have to accept that, you know what, there's a Myth is Canada group that are promoting their idea of a solution, and that's fantastic because it's the core values that are the same as, you know, any other group, doesn't matter. They're on different paths, but we're going to meet, those paths are all going to meet together at some point because the issues that are being affected and why they're created is one entity. It's one thing, which is globalism and the UN agenda. Mm-hmm. And once we meet at that point to take on that enemy, we will be unstoppable as a people, as a country, as Canadians. And we'll get there. Yeah. But so people have to look at things differently. Like, I'm not an enemy to the Mythos Canada. I'm not an enemy to Rick. I'm not an enemy to Plaid Army or any of these. It doesn't matter. All the groups. Mm-hmm. I'm just another platoon, right? And we're right. And you guys have your mission, and I have mine. And if we combine all of these things at one point, hey, it's all good because we all share the same values, right? We all want the same things.
Exactly, and that's definitely one of the more intelligent and insightful things I've ever heard anybody say, because honestly, and I've thought about this a lot, is like, what is the solution? I don't think anybody really knows, but we can definitely pinpoint what the issue is. I 100% agree with you on that. As we just focus on the issue, and I think the solution will come naturally afterwards. Right? We will all once we can unite under that issue, we will work together, because that's what we do as human beings, as Canadians. We find ways to work together and come to some kind of compromise to fix things. Right. Yeah. But just sitting here arguing about the end game, about the finish line, isn't doing any good, because if we can't even agree on what the issue is.
Yeah.
But so you definitely can agree with the issue.
That politics kind of has to fall away, because like I noticed when I was involved in the Yellow Vest and that too, that like one of their things was say no to the UN, but yet people were supporting the CPC. And that's what started a lot of the infighting and stuff like that too. Trying to explain that to them, so it became an us versus them team. Our team, their team. So you kind of got to like push that aside for now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody's been ingrained with a divide and conquer mentality, whether you know it or not. I think because it's in our everyday life, in everywhere you look. You're either like, just the way the world portrays things nowadays. You're either a male, you're a female, you're black or you're white, you're from this country, you're from that country, you're from Alberta, or you're from BC. Like, it doesn't matter. And you kind of conduct your everyday life. Eventually, like, once it gets rolling, you start to look for that everywhere. Like, how is this person different than me? Then what? And why are they my enemy? And
the politicians and the establishment love that. They love to stick everybody in their little box that they can use and break glass in case of emergency. I'm going to pander to Alberta now because that's going to give me electoral success. Or I'm going to pander to the LGBT community because that's going to give me success. I'm going to pander to political correctness because that is the flavor of the day. I don't care if I don't have any principles. I don't have any values. Nobody cares. So I'm going to lead from the rear. I'm going to watch what's in front of me, and that's going to drive which direction I go. Now, what happened and what's been happening here in our political system is the establishment have all committed to the UN. They've all committed to that agenda. That agenda is socialism on a global scale. It's written by communists. All of these goals is socialism on a global scale. If you've committed to that as a party or as an entity, there is no way you cannot move to the left. You will just naturally, which is why we've seen the NDP fall. They're communist. The Liberal Party is just about falling off the table. They're so far left now. The Conservative Party is now in their head. They have to move way to the left to get elected. And here's this PPC party that's against all that. And we're, of course, the Nazis, the racists, the far right. And that's our political landscape right now. And it's all because they're following or being pushed by the prevailing winds instead of going against the current, of what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't a lot of it too, though, is kind of like, to sum up what we were really talking about, is in a lot of ways people aren't focusing on what brings us together as Canadians.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We're way too focused on the trivial day-to-day bullshit, and you know what I mean? Like, even the political climate and conservatives and liberals, like, we should all be focusing on what ultimately brings us together.
Absolutely.
The ideas of freedom and
absolutely. That's another thing the politicians love, and that's part of putting everybody into a box. Because if you can do that, if you can divide everybody, I mean, read The Art of War. It's the
exactly.
Right? And they've been doing it, and they've established that, and they've indoctrinated everybody to be in these little boxes. When, yes, you're 100% correct. We need to start identifying the values we all share and hold in common, and stand together and fight for those values. And that's exactly what populism and nationalism is. And that's why the globalists hate it, and they're scared to death of it, because they understand that once you break the chains of this box or whatever that you're in, and you're actually come out of the box and you look at your buddy next door and say, yeah, you know what? Those are the same things. I agree with you. Those are the same values. Hey, imagine across the country, we have an ability to unite because we have this set of common values, and now we can actually do something about it. But they don't want that. It's the last thing they want is any sense of unity.
It's the moment we do that, we just say, hey, you know what? We all agree on everything. Let's kick these fuckers out, and problem solved. It's really, at the end of the day, it's that easy. Just everybody stand up, unite, and don't follow them.
Right. So that's the hard part. Then is just uniting. It's
exactly. It's finding that common cause, that issue that brings everybody together. Which there is 1,001 of them out there. You take your pick.
Like I can't, none of us. There isn't anybody out there, and there shouldn't be. Or we get into this whole cult of personality. If you unite around one person, you're heading in the wrong direction, right? You have to actually let it or become organic. And the way you do that is by informing people and educating people to the realities. And once they connect their own dots, we'll all be going in the same direction. Right. And then at that point, once we have that again, then we can decide, well, what's the solution? Is it the PPC, or is it another party? Or do we want to reform our Constitution altogether? Or do we want to throw it out and start our own? I mean, those are all the things that you talk about once you're in a position to actually affect the change. Right.
I think a lot of people can't, they have no imagination. They can't imagine that. They can't fathom that we as the people have the power to say completely reform our system, our country, you know what I mean, our politics. Like they almost like they're born into this. It's like how everybody, politicians are corrupt and everybody kind of just accepts that. Well, that's just the way it is.
Well, we're living in a culture of cowardice too, though, right?
But we're so used to it in a lot of ways. It's like people just can't think, like they laugh at you if you tell them that we can all come together and can radically change the direction that our country's going.
Well,
so
I know,
this is the system, this is the way it goes. I just kind of flow in the river. I'm in a raft. I'm just flowing down the river.
But doesn't that come from a place of fear too? That, like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I mean, like in some regard, it comes from a place of fear where even those that could possibly imagine, a different way or would stand up just won't out of
maybe, because in a lot of ways you have to completely reform your worldview. You know what I mean? Everything
from my
you thought
understanding
you
back
knew
in the
is
day,
wrong.
People, you had to be brave. You had to face the wilderness. You had to face tyranny. But nowadays it's easy to bury yourself in technology or just hide behind, of this facade of, the peaceful flowers and green world that we supposedly live in. Especially here in the West. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is burning, and just say no. Everything's fine as long as I just keep my head in the sand and I just go with the flow. I'll be safe. No harm will come to me, and and it's just generation after generation of that. You people have developed no courage. They don't know how to handle. Even courage doesn't mean you don't feel fear. It just means you can overcome it. And I'm seeing a severe lack of that in society.
But what you're going to see, and so none of us. Right, or no group of people are going to be able to go to the masses and sell that to them. Right, you're not going to sell unity to people. You're not going to sell that idea. You just won't, because it has to happen through natural progression. And I mean, we've watched this in Europe, this populist movement. We've watched it now, of course, with Trump. And it happened. Trump's a little different scenario because it's sort of one individual that represents change, because they have a political system that allows for a president and to elect a president. So, but it's a little different, but it's the same vein. It's still that same populist anti-establishment thing. But you look at Europe, who has throughout Europe, same relatively the same system of government as we have. And so what you've seen is this, like for instance, Italy has the League Party, and it started as a separation party because this group of people decided that they didn't like what they were seeing. They didn't like all this immigration. They didn't like all this globalism. So they were going to separate. And as it turned out, because their message resonated with so many people outside of that area that wanted to separate, that they turned it into a national party. And now they're in parliament, and they have power. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in Holland. We've seen it in Hungary, Austria. Even Sweden now has a movement with their I can't remember the party offhand, but it's a populist nationalist party. They're like second in the polls, as bad as Sweden. So, and each one of these countries, it takes a little longer or maybe shorter for them to make these realizations. Canada, we're way behind. That's because we're spoiled, right? Everybody in Canada, generally speaking, has been very spoiled and comfy for a long time.
Yeah.
So you can't go out and say, we need to unite. Although you get frustrated when you try to do it, but it's not going to happen that way. It's got to happen naturally, based on the pain that people are feeling because of the consequences that our government has put on us through committing to this UN agenda.
You know what? You're absolutely right. I've had this. People have said this to me personally, where I've more or less kind of posed that like, oh, we have to unite, and I've been asked a number of times, why? For what reason? Like, what's wrong? And people they look around and they go, please tell me what's wrong. And you're almost kind of stumped. Like you try to explain to them what's wrong with the Canada that we're living in, but for those who are living, comfy and cozy, they don't see it. There is no issue.
Yeah, I got a nice house.
Why?
I got
unite, stand up for what?
Job,
it's fine.
Food in the fridge. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and people have said that to me, and I've almost been like stopped in my tracks, and I had to think, and it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get across to this person now? It's just how am I going to explain to them that their perfect life is wrong? And that in itself almost feels
and so it's things like for instance, the Don Cherry firing. That was a big aha moment, right? And I mean, people, whatever, they minimize it, but it was a moment that everyone in Canada knew, and they felt about what they felt, whether they thought it was the right thing to do or not. It was something that everybody could understand, and everybody got, and it pissed off a lot of people. That one thing. But there's going to be other things that are going to happen that are going to affect everybody. I'll give you another example. In Saskatoon, a few months ago, they put a proposal forward, a $19 billion budget for the next 20 years, I think it was. And people were like, what? $19 billion in a city of 300,000? How is this even possible? How is that even not insane?
Yeah.
But so, because they have these goals that they need to achieve, even on a municipal level, they're part of ICLEI, which is the cities that have all come together to fulfill the commitments to Agenda 21. Once they have these goals that they've committed to, and in order to reach these goals, it's going to cost all of us a shitload of money. And so what do? They come out and they say, we got this budget for $19 billion. And everybody's like, what the hell is going on? Then you get, add in some bike lanes and add in some regulatory things. And all of a sudden people are losing some property rights. And all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, what the hell's going on? Yeah. And then I can put my hand up and say, I know, and hopefully I've reached enough people that before it even gets to that, there's going to be a bunch of people that say, hey, wait a minute, that guy was talking about this a while ago. What the hell was he talking about? ICLEI or something? And then, then it's going to start building and resonating. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that say, yeah, well, you had enough of you people. You're out. Goodbye.
I was going to ask you how you reach the people that agree with a lot of the UN agendas, like their anti-pipeline, green energy.
Wow. Yeah.
They're pro-immigration. But maybe when you start hitting them in the pocketbook, or they start losing property rights or the ability to travel
Well,
Yeah,
a lot of that has
people
to do with the pathological altruism that that plagues our world today. It's like the feel good, do good people. It's like we have to help everybody, everywhere, regardless of the cost.
It's all virtue signaling. Well, what is the basis of the word virtue? It's virtual, right? It's not real. It's just this perception.
We start looking into root words.
Person. And this is what they're using to promote the whole thing. Is it's all on virtue. It's all on unicorn farts and
it's the best.
It's all bullshit. But it makes them at the time. It makes them feel good that I can bike in -20 in the winter and look at me how fucking awesome I am. But you're an idiot because you're biking in -20. You're going to get run over by somebody. You're not doing or accomplishing anything other than saying, look at me, I'm a responsible global citizen. That's it. You're not really doing anything other than signaling virtue. And virtue is nothing tangible. That's just a perception. It's not reality.
Well, like you too, we also own a business, and we get to talk to like homeowners and different people all the time. And some of them even said like that live in the rural areas, that people like in downtown Vancouver, they ride their bike to work, and that they don't understand the importance of having a vehicle or farming and needing these products or fossil fuels or whatever to
cheap energy.
Cheap energy.
I wanted to get in. I wanted to dive into that because I know it goes right in line with your research, Mark, is the whole climate change, because that's the one thing that I've lately has really been lighting a fire under my ass, and I find I'm arguing a lot with a lot of people about it, especially the whole like zero carbon, zero oil, activists, and that, which I feel like I'm surrounded in. And meanwhile, everything that we use in everyday life, is an oil-based product, one way or another. No matter you're like, I'm going to buy a Tesla. It's like, okay, well, what about the factory that makes Tesla? What about the grease that greases the moving parts? What about the the energy that powers it? Like I can go into it goes on and on and on. But
I mean, it's so ridiculous that so they don't think past their face, and it's like, okay, I'm going to plug my car in, and I'm going to save X amount of pounds of CO2, like it matters. But they don't understand, okay, well, where does that energy come from? It doesn't come from a wall. It doesn't come from a post.
It does come from the sky.
From somewhere. And you have to be able to store it somewhere. And you have to have the technology that allows you to store a lot of it. And we don't have that technology. And even the technology that does exist, go look at an open pit in China and see how wonderfully environmental that is. It's but people don't look past their face, right? It's just they live in their bubble. And that's it. And you have to bust that bubble and say, you're being an idiot. You're not thinking. But our politicians are to blame, and the media, of course, is to blame. And it's all connected, of course. But if you look at our provincial politicians, I mean, Scott Knoll, the SAS party, everybody likes him. He's going to fight the carbon tax. Woohoo! We're all sealed. But nobody says, well, wait a minute. When you say you're going to fight the carbon tax in court and spend a bunch of our money doing it, what are you going to do? What's your plan in place of that? And secondly, why do you have a plan to limit CO2 emissions when in Canada we're 1.6 of the world global emissions? That's before you count all of the other carbon capture that nature does. Why are we building a carbon capture facility that costs the taxpayers of Saskatchewan $3 billion annually? Why are you building that? Why are we doing this? Because you're told to? Because you're going with the prevailing winds instead of actually leading from the front and saying, absolutely not. We don't have a CO2 problem. CO2 is plant food. The planet needs more of it. If we want to actually green the planet, green it with some more CO2 like every other greenhouse does.
We're living in a CO2 shortage.
And I can honestly say with firsthand experience, we're working in the manufacturing industries, more specifically a steel plant, that it is absolutely impossible to live in any modern way, having with accessible, the materials that we have today readily accessible without the production of CO2. Like how you think about the most basic materials. Okay, think about steel. You know, one of the things that literally drive the modern world. How are you going to survive without that? How are you going to build these factories that build these supposed clean machines? You know what I mean? And it goes on. And if you go all the way back right to the resources that are mined out of the ground, how are you going to build the equipment? Well, you need a factory that builds the equipment that mines the minerals, and you need factories that build those factories, and factories that build those factories. And it goes,
do you know why that is? Do you know why that equation does that? Because on this planet, in this freaking universe that we live in, everything has a cycle, including CO2, including water. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to get shit for running the water because I was brushing my teeth and I wouldn't shut it off while I'm brushing them. Right?
Yeah, same.
When you're wasting water. Yeah. Actually, I'm not wasting water, because where is it going? It's going from my tap into the river, the same river that it came from.
Yeah.
There is a finite amount of water, let's say.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change. We never lose any. We never gain any. It's always the same amount. It doesn't matter. It's just in different forms. And that's Mother Nature. And you can't control Mother Nature, and you shouldn't try. The same with oil. I mean, the carbon, CO2, whatever you want to call, whatever form it is in, if it's been burnt, then it's in the atmosphere. And the atmosphere will recycle it,
bring it right back down to the earth,
and things will die, and they'll go into the ground, which is where we're getting it all from right now, because things died, right? So it's all part of a cycle. So all of these things, Mother Nature has just a fantastic way of dealing with all of it. And even when we talk about viruses, right, like the coronavirus, if it is a natural virus, instead of some human creating it and wanting to use it for some sort of an agenda. I'm not saying that, but maybe. But not just from a natural perspective. There's lots of things, like they're concerned about overpopulation. We'll let Mother Nature deal with it. Like, she'll figure it out.
Yeah.
She'll either
that's why we have adaptive immune systems, right?
And we're going to lose a bunch of people. But that's because the world can't deal with it. Us humans are so bloody arrogant that we think that we can do all these things and change. It's not. You're not changing a damn thing. No. We're all carbon. Everything that we use, everything that we build, guess what? It all comes from this place. It's all part of it.
That's how I took it. It was an attack on my personal self, because we are carbon-based creatures. It's just... It's so ironic.
Well, there's two things I wanted to say before I forget, and I'll make it really brief. Is one of them was, I find that a lot of people confuse environmental damage with like CO2 emissions. They say, oil's bad because whatever. It's like, okay, you know what? Dumping a bunch of arsenic in a river and you're completely killing all the fauna is one thing, but releasing CO2 into the atmosphere that's not even comparable, right? That's not even in the same book. And the other one was, I remember growing up as a kid, you always heard about one day they're going to tax you for breathing. And I thought that was the most outrageous idea. How would we ever get to that point? But, now I'm starting to see the stepping stones. Now I really am seeing it. It's like,
well, sure. I mean, just greenhouse gases alone. This is what the whole thing is. Greenhouse gas and CO2 contributing to greenhouse gas. I mean, 95% of greenhouse gas is water. They can't. They couldn't find a way to tax steam and water in the atmosphere, and how we're because So what do? They pick CO2, which is like 3.6 of total greenhouse emissions, or greenhouse chemicals, or contributing to greenhouse the effect. So they pick that one, which is just, to me, it's insane, but it's the only thing they really could reach for.
Yeah.
And then you have the UN that says, and in their own documentation, that they're using carbon tax to fund the Sustainable Development Agenda, right? And so right there, all the flags should be up for everybody, saying, well, wait a minute, is this just a tax grab to raise money? Yes. That's it. That's all it is. It's the linchpin to Sustainable Development Agenda, which is why they focus so much on it, because it's a way of raising money, of redistributing the wealth. But it's also the way we can shut it all down by saying, quit playing this whole CO2 game completely. Not carbon pricing or carbon tax or, all these things that they develop around sucking wealth from the West. Get rid of it all. Say, no, we're not playing this game anymore. And guess what? All of a sudden, they don't have the funds to support this agenda, and it'll go away. Now, having said that, it probably won't go away because you have the socialists that are created this thing. They'll try to find another way to keep it alive, to keep it going. It's an ideology. It's not anything else.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember back in the 90s that I could have swore this started out as a carbon monoxide thing, and it kind of evolved into that. I'm probably wrong because I wasn't paying really a lot of, but I could have swore it started out as carbon monoxide was the problem.
Well, the problem with, that wouldn't work because carbon monoxide is just carbon that hasn't been fully burnt. Right?
Yeah, it's just burned.
Exactly.
That's what kills you in the garage if you put a hose in the car.
It's just burned with less oxygen, right? There's no air. But from what I've seen is in my early days of research, and that it was, I dived into a lot of the science, and they looked at Venus, a world that's millions of miles away that we basically know nothing about. You can't even land on the surface. And they said, well, it's roughly the same size as Earth, and it's not too distant from too close or distant from the sun, and it's roughly in the Goldilocks zone. And that, so, hey, you know what? Runaway greenhouse effect. That could happen here. And then it just kind of exploded from there. And you're using an alien world, which realistically is completely unrelatable to ours. As an example of what's going to happen here if we, continue to use factories and live a modern lifestyle.
Right. And it's like
the funny thing about that too is the same scientists also say that the Earth has natural systems, like balancing systems in place. And you know what? Life would never have lived, and the Earth never would have survived as many years, billions and billions of years, if it did not have natural balancing systems that kind of always keep it within a livable zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they use a planet with no
history when the CO2 was 10 times more abundant in the atmosphere. There was times there was no polar ice caps. And you know what? Life was thriving and living, and the Earth has these balancing mechanisms that keep the Earth sustainable. You know what I mean? If it didn't have these balancing mechanisms, we would be Venus or Mars. We would never be here to begin with.
Exactly. Maxim Bernier was the one that he made a post. Thanks to climate change, Canada is here, and we can all enjoy this land. Or somewhere along those lines.
It's like. And he's right, though.
He's right. And I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's screaming and hysterical about climate change, but at the end of the day, if we didn't have climate change, that's when we should panic, because then something really bad is happening.
Yeah.
Because it's changed day one. And
I think that's part of it, though. They kind of convince people that it's like the way it is today is the way it's always been all throughout history. The temperature has always been this perfect equilibrium, and then suddenly, look, it's out of balance. There's crazy stuff happening.
On that note, John, I know you can't believe everything that you read, but I was reading an article. I can't remember what tabloid it was for, but they were talking about how there's a recent debate on the Sahara Desert, because I guess some evidence has surfaced. They say that the Sahara Desert went from one of the greenest places on Earth that, according to this article anyway, I got to look more into this, don't quote me on it, but apparently it had more fresh water in one location than has ever been recorded anywhere on Earth in all of Earth's history. And it went from that, like this green, lush jungle, to the desert that it is in as little as 100 to 500 years. And this is, going back thousands of years, or way before the dawn of modern technology. And it's like, okay, well, if that can happen, then, and if science can't even come to a conclusion on how that is possible, like how can they honestly predict or say anything about the climate today and where it's going and why it's going there? Like, they don't, in my mind, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
They have no perspective of time, right? Like it boils down to, you live in this little thing, but you don't look outside this little thing, this 150 years that you can associate yourself with. And I mean, when was the last time an asteroid hit Earth? And many have hit Earth, and they think that maybe that's how the dinosaurs were killed off, whatever. I mean, that shit happens. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just, we live on a planet that sort of does.
Volcanoes erupting.
Actually, I seen a thing that were like the new asteroid defense system. It's like whatever.
That'll be the next tax.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it will. It'll be the asteroid tax, and we're all going to have to, you know, do not say that too loudly. That'll be the next compact.
Once they have their global government, right? Once they have their global government, it's like the global Earth protection, the asteroid protection thing, and
they got to keep you in a perpetual state of fear, right? Otherwise, they have no purpose anymore.
And
you always got to be on the edge. There's always got to be the next biggest thing. It's coming. It's just around the corner. It's not here yet, but it will be. And you better give us money, otherwise, you know, shit's gonna fucking hit the fan.
There'll be insurance, an asteroid protection plan for your home and your wife and kids. And I know that's going way off the rocker, but
hey, you know what? I feel like carbon tax is off the rocker. Like it is. Like I was saying earlier, it's one step away from taxing your breathing. You breathe carbon, like. I mean, you know, and they're talking about the future is implants and that, and medical implants and GPS implants and internet implants. Who's to say there's not going to be an implant that monitors how much CO2 you output, and you get taxed on that? Like it's you know, it seemed out.
Yeah, especially when the population is really big, and like, you know, there's 10 billion humans on the earth, and every breath every human takes emits like, you know, 10,000 tons of carbon.
Seems outrageous, but
it's carbon science.
Carbon tax in general was outrageous, you know, 30 years ago, and it's like that'll never happen. But look where we are today.
History where they're putting a 16-year-old with some mental issues as the poster girl for climate change, and who's on a podium telling people that she's angry and it's our fault because people are dying. But then when you look at the actual data, in 1900, 500,000 people annually died related to something to do with the climate. 500,000 people annually, right? And so then you have a population boom, you have an industrial boom, and in 2017, that graph goes from 500,000 a year after a population boom, after industrial boom, to set to 12,000. It was either 12,000 or 10,000 people a year die because of climate-related deaths.
Yeah.
So what I mean, it's so laughable, but yet everyone just puts this girl on a pedestal, and we're all supposed to feel guilty. And then when you criticize her, you're bad, and you know, because they use her as a shield. That's all.
Yeah. Can't criticize her.
Some sort of but people buy into this.
And you want to see how bad it is, just go on her Twitter feed and it's like
but what constitutes as a climate related death? So if I'm climbing Mount Everest and a blizzard suddenly comes and freezes me to death, is that a climate related death? Like,
or if you're living in Tornado Alley,
a lot of times they use these figures, right. You know what I mean? And when you really boil it down to like where do they get this number from?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Both the left and the right. And I say that, and it bugs me when I do, but for simplistic conversation, I'll just use it. Left and right, they're both guilty of it because, you know, when it's cold outside, everyone says, "Oh, you know, climate change," you know, blah blah blah, and then when it's hot, the other side says, "Oh, it's climate change." So one uses the other, and they're both wrong because I mean that's weather, which is different than climate, and so. You know, but whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to.
They've made it so you can't even argue with it, though. Because I remember back in the '90s, we were living in Hamilton, Ontario, and the city, it was just boiling back then, like for that period of time.
Oh, we were working on the roof, and it was, you know, declared hotter than Egypt, and
it was the hottest city on earth at one point. But now, the last 10 years, it's been a lot cooler, a lot more snow.
Just a few years ago, I was there, and it snowed, you know, more than you can believe. And everybody was like, "This is so unusual. I've never seen this much snow." And now there's no snow this year.
But I remember back in the 70s, we had the Great Blizzard of 77, 78.
What about the medieval warming period? What about the Little Ice Age? You know, it's like if you just look at a simple graph, anybody can see that these things fluctuate, right?
Exactly. So we adapt or we don't.
Yes.
You know,
but how do you reach those people that are locked in?
Well, and that's the big question. And you have to, you know, ultimately we have to get our voices out. We have to get this information out you know, what they did to Patrick Moore, you know,
Yeah.
because just the fact that somebody had the balls to invite him to this thing in Regina, that they've since kicked him off and canceled.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
But, you know, those things help because people then, you know, they see this. Like, why was he invited? And then why was he, you know, canceled? I mean, what the hell's going on here? So all of these things, you know, we got a huge task ahead of us. You know, we got everyone against us, the media, the politicians, the Hollywood, our schools. I mean, everything's against us. So it's an incredible battle. But I still see hope. I'm feeling hope because it's the people that actually will determine this, not the politicians, not the academics, not Hollywood. You know, and so we have to just get out and reach them and in any way we can.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's I've been thinking a lot lately too. It's you know, life sometimes it just feels so plain Jane, like the day-to-day grind, and it's like what is a grand, like, you know, everybody almost wants like a grand purpose, like you want to feel like you're doing something in life, like you're actually accomplishing something, not just going to work and making money and paying bills and taxes and that. And the more I do this, the more I kind of feel, you know, this is our time. This is our purpose. This is what we're meant to do. You know, this is our great battle. This is the struggle that we're all here and we were born to fight in. You know, whatever way, shape, or form it takes.
The scary thing is people laying down on the train tracks and in the middle of the roads downtown Vancouver. That's
but
kind of their
just
life too, right?
They're feeling the same way, but in the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. But it's just funny though. It's like it finally, you know, the more we do this, the more it feels like it kind of gives your life purpose. Like you really are fighting the good fight, you know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I understand.
We all need to have purpose. We all need to have that sense of purpose instead of just checking in, checking out, and whatever. I mean, that's why I like Jordan Peterson so much. Jim will like this comment because I think he's done that to a lot of young men. He's sort of, you know, through his lectures and everything that's gone viral, you know, Rules for Life. I think he's opened that gate to where the young guys see that it's important to have purpose, the ones that watch them anyway, because you know, you watch kids that don't have all I have to do is watch my own, you know. My youngest, he works for me, and when he's working, he's the happiest he can be. When he's not working on the weekend or whatever, you know, he's in his bedroom playing video games and he feels like shit, right?
Yeah.
What's he achieving? Absolutely nothing, right? He's only yelling at his TV screen. When he's actually working and he's gaining actual satisfaction and has a purpose and he takes pride in it, then he feels good. He's tired. He's whatever shit happened during the day, whatever, but he still feels right. And this is what the whole establishment, I think, is tried to take away from our youth and our kids. And this sense of accomplishment. You know, even the destruction of the family. I mean, you know, men should be proud of their brood and their family and their wife. Wives should be proud of their brood and their home and whether they work or not, whatever. But all of these things are an attack on those values that you actually gain real satisfaction from, instead of all of this superficial bullshit that they throw at us, right? And
as a longtime roofer and spending 2 weeks here in the winter in BC, and it's been raining 24/7. You know, you start to appreciate getting up and going to work. You know, you looking out the window and it's pouring rain, and you're just sitting there, and it's nothing to do. Right? So you really appreciate going to work and working hard and coming home and having that sense of accomplishment.
Absolutely.
And, you know,
and you know, especially, you know, when I worked for the government for 25 years, and that was hell. You know, I still I had to gain my own satisfaction from the job I was doing, and you know, and the camaraderie with the boys, whatever, that was all good. But you didn't get it. The employer didn't give it to you. I was just a number. You know, whatever. Here, put a uniform on, go sit there, and I don't want to hear from you for 25 years, kind of thing. So, you know, it depends where you're working, I guess, but you have to create that own satisfaction and recognize that you're not going to get it from anybody else. You have to get it from within, right? And so whether that's working for somebody or starting your own business and running your own thing, It has to come from within. You have to satisfy yourself. And if you do that, then you'll make your bosses happy and whoever else cares. But ultimately, you know, you have to look out for number one. You have to be satisfied in what you're doing, the best of your ability. And you know what? If you do that, you're set.
I think
that's part of the agenda of the UN is to take that away, though. And it's like, don't worry, we're going to provide you with your purpose. We're going to provide you with all your ideas and your responsibilities, and we'll lay it out.
But at the same time, though, it's like they almost give us a grander purpose, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to touch on. Is like it goes even beyond just getting satisfaction with work. Now, you know, we're kind of we're fighting a battle that goes beyond even ourselves and our families, and that, you know, it's just like it's, you know, you think about you know, I can say personally, and I'm sure most of us can say, is our forefathers, you know, they went off and they fought in the Great Wars, and they probably, you know, felt a purpose so great that it was, you know, it was the greatest adventure and greatest battle ever, but it gave them real meaning. Like they were willing to lay down their lives for, you know, it was more than just going to work every day to provide for your family. This was something that you were going to die for, right? And they're pushing us to that point where, you know, by saying like, hey, we're going to provide everything for you, you know, and some people will take the bait, but others are going to go in the opposite direction and say, no, actually, I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to go above and beyond, you know, even the Call of Duty, and do better for my country.
Because, you know, I mean, ultimately, it is about, you know, the way I look at it anyway, it's about the individual, right? It is about me. And what do I represent? Yeah. Why am I fighting for this? Why am I busting my ass all day, every day to do what I'm doing? Well, it's not because I'm going to be personally, you know, rewarded for this, because I'm not. No. My business is hurting. Everything hurts because of all the time. But on a bigger scale, I understand that my kids and their kids will benefit from any success that I'm having in this thing I'm doing. So it is about me, and it's about my, you know, my family and my kids and their kids. But yes, so I'm willing to sacrifice this. And if everybody else would worry about themselves and their children and their family around these core values that we all share, instead there's the collective attitude, which is nobody really means anything. No individual is, you know, above another or important on their own. It's all about this collective, right? It's all, and this is the thing between left and right, and communism and not communism, and free market and freedom, and so that's ultimately where the line is, and so some people get confused, I think, when they end up on the left side of the line and into the whole socialist idea that it's going to be good for everybody. Well, no, it's not, actually, because you're not taking care of yourself. Nobody else is taking care of themselves, and you're relying on some state, some politician or some dictator to determine what's good for you or not. And ultimately, it never works, because humanity doesn't allow for socialism to work on that scale. It just doesn't, right?
And relying on the state too. Like, look at the 20th century. Democide is what killed 250 million people in the 20th century. Like death by government. So those aren't the people that you really want to rely on, you know.
Well, no, anybody. It doesn't, you know, any socialist or communist regime, you know, it's going to fail, because you're putting a small group of people in power and in charge and dictating to everybody what they're going to do, and it never works because nature doesn't allow for that to work. You know?
No, it's flawed right from the beginning, because you know, they always treat it as though it's this perfect philosophy where everybody is absolutely equal across all playing fields. But it's like, but the very moment that someone has to decide what you get for your rations, like how much food each individual is going to get, automatically there's a person that has more power and isn't equal to the rest of the people. The moment someone has to make that decision, like how we're going to divvy up the food, it's immediately the whole philosophy breaks down, because you're immediately not equal anymore. Because this person or group of people,
that's interesting, because when you talk about equality, you know, again, the natural process of things, there is inequality. You have to have inequality for any system.
The world is unfair,
right? And it may be unfair, but that's sort of life, and it's you're never going to achieve equality. You won't do it. It's impossible.
It's flawed. It's completely flawed.
All of the parameters, which then what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it seems it's funny. I was just reading before we went on the air, recapping on some of like the 17 goals of sustainable development, and I was reading about that, the equality for all. And it was rolling it around in my own mind, like trying to imagine how that would even be possible. Like it's just
like, let's say we're building a basketball team. You know what I mean? Something as stupid as that. We're building a basketball team, but everybody is on equal playing field. So you have to hire. So you have to like take people onto the team, both that are short, you know what I mean, that are fat, that are completely unfit. You know what I mean? Some people are born really tall, and they have an advantage over everybody else when you're playing basketball.
Or they're black.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but right? firefighters, right? Like not everybody is suitable to do that kind of job. Not everybody can lift that kind of weight and handle that kind of stress and react, in those kind of situations.
That's the same brain
simply
chemistry.
Is impossible. I can honestly,
and then you transpose that onto a global agenda where it says, I think it's number 10, equality within and among countries. Well, what does that look like? What does equality look like on a global scale? And what does that? How does that look like for me in Canada? Well, it looks really fucking bad, because if you want all of these countries, 135 of them that are all shitholes, second and third world countries.
I love that word, shitholes.
Everybody equal. You got to bring those 135 up to a particular level by using the wealth over here from another, 60 countries. What's going to happen to these 60 countries? Well, they're all going to
come down,
and all of these ones are going to be brought up, but we're all going to be way down here. Equally.
No, there's gonna be the ring of leaders, or whatever, however you want to look at it, and everybody else is gonna be equally fucking poor. That's it. That's the only equality that I can ever imagine.
And thoroughly dependent on government. And what does that government look like? Well, it looks like a global socialist, nightmare.
I talk to some people and they say like, well, eventually we're going to build machines and they'll just do everything for us. And it's like, okay, even if like say that were to happen, I mean, what kind of world will we be living in where you're completely dependent on technology?
How will we be as people?
Everything for you.
Imagine 5 or 6 generations of people where everything is provided for you. Where when you think back in history, even your grandfathers, everything was provided for them.
Oh, if they flip the switch,
as humans, we would be literally babies in adult bodies.
We'd be done. Humanity wouldn't survive.
No, exactly. No. It's funny.
It almost sounds like science fiction, but that's kind of it. You can see how like the potential for the world to move into that, right? Yeah. Like it's not impossible. Let's put it that way.
It's funny because, like, for instance, online banking and how they can take bills out automatically. You know what I mean, over a suspended period of time. I know it's very trivial, it's very small. But I've always had a problem with that. I feel like, the moment that I say that, okay, just automatically take out, my cell phone bill every month, I'm kind of losing control, losing the responsibility of actually doing it. You know what I mean? I'm just letting someone else take care of it. And I know it's a tiny thing, but collectively, thousands and thousands of these tiny little trivial things that we do on a daily basis, like once machines or AI or whatever, they take all these tasks that we would normally be responsible for, and they take that responsibility. We become more like children. We lose control.
Well, if I speak from a point of what would I say? Like, I'm at a loss for words here. Okay, my personal experience. That's what I wanted to say. Personal experience. Sorry. Yeah. I'd say I signed up with a gym, and I allowed them to take payments out automatically. So, at no point could I just decide, I don't want to pay you this month. Well, what ended up happening is they ended up taking out additional payments when they weren't supposed to. So I took the issue up with them over and over and over again, and they never resolved the issue. So eventually I decided, I don't want to pay you guys anymore. So what did they do? They started just taking payment after payment after payment out of my account. even though I wasn't using their service. So I drained my account, like all the money out of my account, having no other choice because, you know, the bank wouldn't allow me to put stop payments on it, this, that, and the other. They basically said I would have to close my account, take it up with them in court, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, you know, I'm going to take all my money out. And when my account was at zero, they took 25 payments out and drove me into a $2,500 overdraft in a single day, purely out of spite. And I had to go and I had to take that issue up with the bank, which they almost forced me to pay. But for some, you know, miracle, they said, you know what, fine, we'll just absolve all that and close your account. But you see, once you relinquish control, you have no control. You don't get to decide, you know what, fuck you, I'm not paying you anymore. I don't like your service. You've been screwing me around. You've stole hundreds of dollars from me.
Look at your taxes. You know, I mean, I couldn't find anybody in Saskatoon right now that would be happy with the way the government's spending our money, or my money. I know I'm not happy with the way, but if I said, you know what, tomorrow I'm not going to pay taxes, within a week my accounts would be shut down, locked, and the money would be gone.
Yeah.
Just like
absolutely.
Yeah. See, it's kind of, it's, you know, you should always maintain control as much as possible. You know, it should be, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's your responsibility to pay a bill or not. You know, you should be the one physically going there and making the effort to pay it, not just relying on technology.
That's part of the digital currency too, though, because digital currency, once they completely eliminate cash altogether, you get a fine, like say getting pulled over, it just immediately gets deducted from your bank account.
Yeah, there's already a lot of talk.
You know what I mean?
Actually,
Norway, good. My life is from. It's if they want to drive into town or use a bridge or a tunnel, there's a little sensor that every car has one. You have to get, just like a license plate now. You have to have it in your car. Yeah. And as you drive past this toll, it automatically comes out of your account.
That's kind of like in Ontario, they got the 407 toll highway.
They don't send you a bill; it comes right out of your account.
It comes right out of their account.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but the 407 in Ontario, the toll highway is the same thing. They got a transponder. You have to have it in the window. And if you want to drive on that highway, you automatically get billed whether you like it or not.
Yeah, but it's no. He doesn't mean
the money just comes right out.
Hold on, Joe. With the 407, you get a bill, and then you choose when to pay it. Or if you pay
is it the way it is? I thought you just got the money automatically.
That is the way it is. No. You choose when to pay it or not. You have that.
Then I stand corrected.
That's one good thing John Horgan did here is he got rid of the tolls on the major bridge overpasses and that.
Mm. Yeah, but wasn't that a thing where the bridges were privately built and
same with the 407.
They're privately owned, privately built.
Yeah, and insurance went up when they got rid of the tolls. So one way or another, you're paying. Now everybody has to pay for it, whether
because
the bridges
probably
or not.
making more money from it now.
Yeah. In some way, yeah. I guarantee you, they never do something like that without making sure that, you know, it's like a form of monkey branching. You always make sure you hold on to another branch before you let go of this branch.
Well, every step they take, you know, it only moves them forward, never backwards.
We're getting rid of the tolls, we're raising your ICBC insurance, or you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's government universal insurance, pretty much, right? It doesn't really matter where you go or who you go to. You pay the same. You know, if some other idiot decides to get into an accident or do something stupid with his vehicle, guess what? Everybody's insurance premiums go up because of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, I'm at an hour and a half. That's usually my.
Hey, well, we appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah, it's been excellent.
It was awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody, subscribe to Mark's channel.
If you guys want to narrow down on some UN stuff, I know we went on a bunch of different tangents. But if you want to narrow down on some of that stuff, I can come back anytime, whatever. It's all good.
Yeah, hopefully we can do this in the future, and we wish you and your family the best. Thank you so much.
We're always interested to hear what you have to say. It's the tangents. I mean, it just comes naturally with us, right? It's just who we are. What can I say? But it's been a pleasure having you on. Yeah.
You guys got a good thing going here. Actually, it's you got a nice flow. You guys are intelligent. You have lots of good ideas. You guys will be great.
People awesome. Like you inspire us. So
thanks to you. We're doing this. So appreciate it, brother.
Excellent. Take care.
All right.
Awesome. Take care.
Wow, that was great. What a great time. And I was a little bit worried about Mark's a very serious and focused guy, but that really
went a great
well.
Conversation.
And
I'm just glad to hear that we're intelligent. At least intelligible.
Somebody thinks I'm smart. Thanks everybody for watching. I had a really good time.
Yeah, as always.
We're gonna try and do this once or twice a week. Just, try and get on a new guest each time and get a different perspective on different things.
Honestly, I think the primary thing about us too is just having an organic conversation. We never really know where our talks are going to go, and I think that's one of the most important parts too, because we always touch upon such a variety of these personal subjects that I think everybody kind of can resonate with.
Yeah, I can relate.
For me, it's a big learning experience. I'm not going to claim to be the smartest guy in the world, and I lack in a lot of areas. And bringing people like Mark and Raging Humanists on, and others that we'll look forward to. I'm just learning, just like everybody else, and that's that's what we all got to do.
Yeah,
exactly.
That was great. I had a good time.
Yeah, me too.
I want to add to the stream before, or you guys want to just end it there? And
no, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think exactly. Fuck the UN. Yeah, that's the conclusion that we all came to, right?
That's one thing we can all agree. If anybody watches this video too, make sure you guys subscribe to Mark's channel and follow him on Facebook and Twitter. And if you like our videos, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon too.
Yeah, just so we can annoy you every time we make a new video. I think I seen somebody else say that, but it was pretty good.
Just do this just to piss off everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks, guys. We're going to end the stream there. See you guys in the green room.
All right.
Take care. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Have a good night.